The mystery history never expected history tells us that civilization began around 5,000 years ago. It is one of the first stories most of us learn about the ancient world. We are taught that people gradually settled beside rivers, learned to farm, built villages, and eventually raised magnificent civilizations like ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. From there, the story seems simple. Humanity advanced, cities grew, writing was invented, and history, as we know it, began. But what if that story is incomplete? What if one of the greatest chapters of human history unfolded thousands of years earlier, only to disappear so completely that almost every trace of it was forgotten? What if civilization did not begin where we have always believed, but much further back in time, hidden beneath layers of earth, ice, and forgotten memory? Imagine standing on a quiet hillside where nothing appears unusual. No towering ruins, no broken temples, no great monuments rising from the landscape. Just an ordinary mound that thousands of people had walked past without a second thought. Then imagine archaeologists beginning to dig, expecting little more than another ancient settlement, only to uncover something so astonishing that it forced historians to question one of the foundations of human history itself. Buried beneath that hill were enormous stone pillars, some weighing more than 20 tons, carved with remarkable images of lions, foxes, snakes, birds, and wild boar. These were not rough stones placed by chance. They had been carefully shaped, transported, arranged, and decorated with extraordinary skill. Even more astonishing was their age. These monuments were already standing nearly 12,000 years ago. That means they existed thousands of years before Stonehenge, thousands of years before the Great Pyramids of Egypt. They were built before writing, before bronze, before the wheel, and, according to everything historians once believed, before human beings had even begun farming. That discovery raised a question no one expected to ask. If people living at the end of the last ice age were capable of creating monuments on such a massive scale, then who exactly were they? How did they organize hundreds of people without cities? Who planned these astonishing structures? Who fed the workers? And perhaps the biggest mystery of all, what else from that forgotten world has simply vanished beneath the passage of time? If you enjoy uncovering the mysteries that history still cannot fully explain, make sure you subscribe and join us. Every week, we explore remarkable discoveries, forgotten civilizations, hidden ancestry, and the evidence that continues to reshape our understanding of the past. You may discover that history is far more surprising than you were ever taught. For generations, archaeologists believed they understood the order in which civilization developed. First came farming. Once people could produce reliable food, they settled permanently. Villages grew into towns. Towns became cities. Religion, government, writing, and monumental architecture followed. It was a logical sequence, one repeated in textbooks across the world for decades. But the discovery beneath that lonely hill suggested something completely different. Instead of farming leading to civilization, could shared beliefs, cooperation, and monumental construction have come first? Could gathering to build sacred places have encouraged people to settle together, eventually leading to agriculture rather than the other way around? It was an extraordinary possibility, one that challenged ideas historians had accepted for generations. Even more remarkable is the fact that this discovery did not reveal an isolated mystery. Around the world, archaeologists have begun uncovering evidence that the closing chapters of the Ice Age were far more complex than anyone once imagined. Ancient coastlines now lie beneath more than 100 meters of seawater. Entire landscapes where early people once lived have disappeared beneath the oceans. New discoveries continue to emerge from places once thought unimportant, reminding us that the archaeological record is not complete. In fact, much of humanity's earliest story may still be hidden, waiting to be found. This does not mean there was a forgotten global empire or that every legend is literally true. Archaeology demands evidence, not speculation. Yet history has repeatedly shown that yesterday's impossibility can become today's accepted fact. There was a time when the ancient city of Troy was dismissed as little more than myth. There was a time when no one imagined that monumental stone architecture could exist nearly 12,000 years ago. Both assumptions eventually changed because of new discoveries. So perhaps the most important question is not whether history has all the answers. It is whether we have uncovered enough evidence to ask the right questions. Because the site hidden beneath that ordinary hill has a name that has become one of the most important in modern archaeology. And the story of how it was discovered may completely change the way you think about the birth of civilization. In the next part, we travel to southeastern Turkey, where the extraordinary discovery of Göbekli Tepe forced archaeologists to reconsider one of history's oldest assumptions, and where one remarkable excavation opened the door to a mystery that is still unfolding today. Göbekli Tepe and the day history changed. In the rolling hills of southeastern Turkey, not far from the modern city of Şanlıurfa, stood an unremarkable mound that local farmers had known for generations. To most people, it looked like nothing more than another natural hill. Fragments of worked stone occasionally appeared on the surface, but archaeologists initially assumed it was the remains of a medieval cemetery. No one suspected that beneath the soil lay one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the modern era. That changed in 1994, when German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt visited the site. Unlike earlier researchers, Schmidt believed the scattered stones on the surface hinted at something far older and far more significant. Almost immediately after excavations began, his instincts proved correct. As layers of earth were carefully removed, enormous limestone pillars emerged from the ground. They were unlike anything anyone had expected to find. Some stood over 5 meters tall. Others weighed as much as 20 tons. They were arranged in carefully designed circular enclosures, suggesting deliberate planning rather than random construction. Their surfaces were decorated with remarkably detailed carvings of foxes, wild boars, vultures, snakes, cranes, gazelles, and powerful predators that once roamed the ancient landscape. Many of the pillars were shaped like giant human figures, complete with carved arms, hands, belts, and loincloths, yet they had no faces. Even today, their purpose remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The first question was obvious. How old were these monuments? Radiocarbon dating produced an astonishing answer. The oldest sections of Göbekli Tepe were built around 9600 BC, making them approximately 11,500 years old. That meant these structures had already stood for thousands of years before Stonehenge was even imagined. They were ancient long before the first pharaoh ruled Egypt. In fact, they belong to a time when much of the world was only beginning to recover from the last ice age. The implications were extraordinary. According to the long-accepted model of history, societies capable of constructing monumental architecture should already have been farming, living in permanent settlements and producing food surpluses. Yet the people associated with Göbekli Tepe appear to have lived before clear evidence of large-scale agriculture in the region. Instead, archaeologists found abundant remains of wild plants and animals, suggesting that many of the builders were still hunter-gatherers. This was not simply another ancient ruin. It challenged the sequence that historians had relied upon for decades. If hunter-gatherers really built Göbekli Tepe, then perhaps they were far more organized, skilled, and socially complex than anyone had previously imagined. Think about what such a project required. Massive limestone pillars had to be quarried using stone tools alone. They then had to be transported across uneven ground without metal, wheels, or domesticated draft animals. Hundreds of people would likely have been needed to cut, shape, move, and raise each pillar into position. Someone had to design the layout. Someone had to organize the workforce. Someone had to ensure enough food was available to sustain such an enormous undertaking. These are not the actions of isolated families wandering the landscape. They point to remarkable levels of planning, cooperation, and shared purpose. But perhaps the greatest mystery is not how Göbekli Tepe was built. It is why it was buried. At some point, after centuries of use, the builders deliberately filled the monumental enclosures with thousands of tons of earth, stone, and debris. This was not the result of natural erosion. It appears to have been an intentional act. They carefully buried the site themselves before leaving it behind. Why? Was it part of a sacred ritual marking the end of its use? Did changing beliefs make the complex unnecessary? Were environmental changes forcing communities to relocate? Or was there another reason that has been lost forever? Archaeologists still cannot say with certainty. Even more intriguing is the fact that what we know today represents only a fraction of the story. Modern surveys indicate that the visible excavations cover only a small percentage of the entire site. Vast sections remain, untouched beneath the earth, preserved for future generations and future technologies that may answer questions we cannot yet solve. This is where careful archaeology becomes even more exciting than speculation. Every new trench has the potential to rewrite another page of human history. Every carved stone has the potential to reveal beliefs, rituals, and social structures that existed thousands of years before writing allowed people to record their own stories. Yet as astonishing as Göbekli Tepe is, it raises an even bigger question. If people were capable of creating monuments like these nearly 12,000 years ago, what was happening elsewhere in the world at the same time? And if entire communities once lived along the coastlines of the Ice Age, where are those settlements today? The answer may lie beneath the oceans themselves. Because around the end of the last Ice Age, the Earth experienced one of the most dramatic environmental transformations in human history, a period that may have erased countless traces of our earliest past and left behind legends that still echo across cultures today. In the next part, we explore the Younger Dryas, the end of the Ice Age, and why some scientists believe rising seas may have hidden entire chapters of humanity's story beneath the waves. The day the world changed, for thousands of years, the people who built places like Göbekli Tepe lived in a world that looked very different from the one we know today. Vast ice sheets still covered enormous parts of the northern hemisphere. Sea levels were dramatically lower than they are now, exposing millions of square kilometers of land that have since disappeared beneath the oceans. Rivers followed different paths, coastlines stretched far beyond their present boundaries, and landscapes that are now underwater were once home to plants, animals, and human communities. Then something changed. Around 12,900 years ago, the Earth entered a period known as the Younger Dryas. Temperatures in many parts of the northern hemisphere dropped suddenly, interrupting a warming trend that had followed the last ice age. For more than 1,000 years, colder conditions returned, affecting ecosystems, wildlife, and the people who depended upon them. Scientists continue to debate the exact causes of this abrupt climate reversal. Some researchers point to massive releases of fresh water into the North Atlantic that disrupted ocean circulation. Others have proposed more controversial explanations, including the possibility of a cosmic impact, although that hypothesis remains actively debated and has not achieved broad scientific consensus. What archaeologists do agree on is that the end of the Ice Age was not a calm, gradual transition. It was a time of enormous environmental change. As the great ice sheets eventually melted, sea levels rose by more than 120 meters. To put that into perspective, imagine standing on a modern coastline and watching the ocean slowly advance until it swallowed cities, forests, valleys, and entire river systems. Over centuries, land that had supported generations of human life disappeared beneath the sea. Today, those ancient landscapes lie hidden beneath the waters of the Mediterranean, the North Sea, the Persian Gulf, Southeast Asia, and countless other coastal regions around the world. This creates one of archaeology's greatest challenges. Human beings have always been drawn to water. Rivers provided fresh drinking water, fertile soil, fish, transportation, and access to trade. Coastlines offered abundant food and relatively mild climates. If prehistoric people followed the same patterns as later civilizations, then many of their earliest settlements were probably built close to rivers and shores. But those are precisely the places that rising seas claimed first. In other words, some of humanity's oldest settlements may not be missing because they never existed. They may be missing because they now rest beneath dozens of meters of water, beyond the reach of most traditional archaeological excavation. This possibility has encouraged underwater archaeology to become one of the fastest-growing fields in the study of ancient history. Around the world, researchers continue searching submerged landscapes for evidence of prehistoric communities. Some discoveries have already revealed ancient forests, stone tools, campsites, and settlements that once stood on dry land before the oceans reclaimed them. It is a reminder that our map of the ancient world is still incomplete. Whenever people hear about vanished lands beneath the sea, one name almost always comes to mind: Atlantis. For more than 2,000 years, the story of Atlantis has fascinated explorers, writers, and dreamers alike. The tale comes from the ancient Greek philosopher Plato, who described a powerful island civilization that supposedly disappeared beneath the sea in a single day and night of catastrophe. But here we need to separate evidence from imagination. There is currently no accepted archaeological evidence that Plato's Atlantis existed as a real advanced civilization exactly as he described it. Most historians believe Plato used the story as a philosophical lesson about power, pride, and the dangers of corruption rather than as a historical account. Yet the popularity of Atlantis raises an interesting question of its own. Why do so many cultures around the world preserve stories of devastating floods? The ancient Mesopotamians told of a great flood that destroyed much of humanity. The Hebrew Bible describes Noah and the Ark. Ancient Greek traditions tell of Deucalion surviving a catastrophic flood. Similar flood traditions appear in parts of India, China, Australia, and among many indigenous cultures across the Americas. These stories are not identical, and they should not all be treated as records of the same event. They emerged from different cultures across different periods of history. However, many archaeologists and geologists acknowledge that real floods, changing coastlines, and rising seas could have inspired some of these traditions. Communities witnessing dramatic environmental change would naturally pass those experiences to future generations, where history and storytelling gradually became intertwined. This is where the real mystery becomes even more compelling than fiction. Perhaps we do not need a mythical lost continent to explain why stories of drowned worlds continue appearing across human history. Perhaps ordinary people living through extraordinary environmental change created memories so powerful that echoes of them survive for thousands of years. If that is true, then some of our oldest legends may contain fragments of genuine prehistoric experiences, preserved not in stone, but in human memory. And yet, the story does not end there. Because Göbekli Tepe is no longer the only ancient site forcing archaeologists to ask difficult questions. Across Asia, Europe, and beneath the sea itself, other discoveries have sparked debates about how much of humanity's earliest past still remains hidden. Some have transformed archaeology. Others remain fiercely controversial. In the next part, we travel across the world to examine these remarkable sites, separating established evidence from speculation as we explore whether humanity's forgotten past is larger than anyone once imagined. The lost worlds beneath our feet. If Göbekli Tepe taught archaeologists anything, it is that history can change with a single discovery. A site that lay unnoticed for thousands of years forced experts to rethink some of their most fundamental assumptions about early human societies. That raises an exciting possibility. If one forgotten monument could remain hidden for nearly 12 millennia, how many others are still waiting to be found? The truth is that archaeologists are discovering new sites every year. Some quietly fill gaps in our understanding of the past. Others ignite fierce debates that can last for decades. The challenge is knowing which discoveries genuinely rewrite history and which require much more evidence before extraordinary conclusions can be drawn. One of the most debated sites lies off the coast of Japan. Beneath the waters near Yonaguni Island is an enormous rock formation that resembles massive staircases, terraces, and flat platforms. To some researchers, it appears almost impossible for nature to have created such geometric shapes. They suggest it may represent the remains of a structure that stood on dry land before sea levels rose at the end of the Ice Age. Other geologists strongly disagree. They argue that the sandstone in the region naturally fractures along straight lines, creating formations that can appear surprisingly artificial without any human involvement. After decades of research, no broad scientific consensus has emerged that the Yonaguni Monument is a man-made city. It remains one of archaeology's most intriguing and controversial mysteries, reminding us that unusual shapes alone are not enough to rewrite history. Thousands of kilometers away in Indonesia stands another site that has sparked global discussion. Gunung Padang is a volcanic hill covered with ancient stone terraces. Excavations have confirmed that people modified and used the site over many centuries. However, some researchers have proposed that parts of the structure may be far older than previously believed, suggesting construction could extend deep into the Ice Age. Those claims have attracted worldwide attention, but they have also faced significant criticism from many archaeologists and geologists, who argue that the evidence for such extreme dates is not yet convincing. The debate continues, illustrating an important lesson in archaeology. Exciting hypotheses must withstand careful testing before they become accepted history. This is how science moves forward. New ideas are welcomed, but they must survive rigorous examination. The same careful approach applies to another famous mystery known as the Bimini Road in the Bahamas. Under shallow water lies a line of large limestone blocks that resemble an ancient road or harbor wall. For decades, some writers have suggested it might be connected to the legend of Atlantis. Most geologists, however, conclude that the formation is a natural beach rock feature shaped by geological processes rather than human construction. While it remains visually striking, there is currently no convincing archaeological evidence linking it to a lost civilization. These examples reveal something important. The real excitement of archaeology does not come from proving every mystery true. It comes from following evidence wherever it leads, even when that evidence challenges our favorite theories. In fact, some of the greatest archaeological discoveries were initially dismissed because they seemed too extraordinary to believe. For centuries, the ancient city of Troy was widely regarded as little more than a legendary setting for Homer's epic poems. Many scholars doubted it had ever existed. Then, in the 19th century, excavations uncovered the remains of a real ancient city in northwestern Turkey, demonstrating that myths can sometimes preserve memories of genuine places, even if the stories themselves become embellished over time. The lesson is not that every legend is historical fact. It is that archaeology should remain open to new evidence while demanding high standards of proof. Today, researchers are using technologies that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Ground-penetrating radar allows scientists to detect buried structures without digging. Satellite imagery reveals patterns invisible from the ground. Airborne laser scanning, known as LiDAR, can strip away dense forests digitally, exposing ancient roads, cities, and monuments hidden beneath vegetation. Underwater sonar is mapping landscapes that disappeared beneath rising seas thousands of years ago. With every advance in technology, the ancient world becomes a little less mysterious. Yet even with these remarkable tools, archaeologists estimate that only a tiny fraction of the world's archaeological sites have ever been excavated. Vast regions remain unexplored. Entire prehistoric coastlines still lie beneath the oceans. Countless ancient settlements are buried beneath modern cities, deserts, forests, and farmland. In other words, the history we know today is not a finished book. It is an unfinished manuscript with many missing chapters. That may be the most important lesson of all. History is not static. It evolves with every discovery, every excavation, and every carefully analyzed fragment of stone, bone, or pottery. Ideas once accepted as unquestionable can change when new evidence emerges. Göbekli Tepe proved that. Future discoveries may do so again. But after exploring ancient monuments, submerged landscapes, and forgotten sites around the world, one profound question still remains. If civilization did not appear overnight, but instead developed through countless generations adapting to dramatic environmental change, then perhaps the greatest story is not about a single lost civilization at all. Perhaps it is about humanity itself. Because when we step back and look at the evidence as a whole, a remarkable picture begins to emerge, one that connects the end of the Ice Age, the rise of farming, the construction of monuments, and the birth of the world's first civilizations into a story far older and far more extraordinary than most of us ever imagined. In the final part, we bring all of these discoveries together and answer the question that began this journey. Was there truly a civilization before ancient Egypt, Or has archaeology revealed something even more fascinating than that? The civilization before history? When we began this journey, we asked a simple question that has fascinated historians, archaeologists, and curious minds alike. Was there a civilization before ancient Egypt? At first glance, it seems like the answer should be straightforward. After all, Egypt and Mesopotamia have long been celebrated as the birthplaces of civilization. Their pyramids, temples, cities, and written records transformed human history and left behind unmistakable evidence of complex societies. But archaeology has shown us that the story does not begin there. Long before the first pharaoh wore a crown, before cuneiform was pressed into clay tablets, and before the great cities of the ancient world appeared along fertile rivers, human beings were already capable of astonishing achievements. At Göbekli Tepe, people gathered to construct monumental stone circles that still inspire awe today. They organized labor, transported enormous pillars, created sophisticated carvings, and built places whose purpose continues to puzzle researchers. They achieved all of this at a time when many experts once believed humanity was still living only in small, scattered bands of hunter-gatherers. At the same time, the end of the Ice Age was transforming the planet itself. Melting glaciers reshaped coastlines, rising seas swallowed vast landscapes, and communities adapted to an environment changing before their eyes. Some settlements vanished beneath the oceans. Others evolved into the farming societies that would eventually give rise to the world's earliest cities. The more archaeologists uncover, the clearer one fact becomes. Human history was never a simple, straight line. It was a long and complex journey filled with innovation, adaptation, setbacks, migrations, and remarkable resilience. So, does that mean there was a forgotten global civilization before Egypt? Based on the evidence available today, the answer is no. Archaeologists have not discovered proof of a worldwide advanced civilization that disappeared before recorded history. There is no accepted evidence for an Ice Age empire that built cities across the globe before vanishing without a trace. But that conclusion should not disappoint us, because the real story is, in many ways, even more extraordinary. The evidence suggests that the people living near the end of the Ice Age were far more capable, organized, and creative than previous generations of historians had imagined. They were not simply surviving from one season to the next. They were forming communities, creating symbolic art, developing shared beliefs, constructing monumental architecture, and laying social foundations that may eventually have led to agriculture and permanent settlement. Slowly. In other words, civilization did not suddenly appear out of nowhere. It evolved unevenly across different regions. And every new discovery helps us understand that process a little better. That is why Göbekli Tepe matters so much. It does not prove every theory about lost civilizations, nor does it confirm every ancient legend. Instead, it reminds us that history is still being written. It demonstrates that even our most trusted assumptions can change when new evidence emerges from the ground. Perhaps the greatest lesson archaeology teaches us is humility. Every generation believes it has finally solved the mysteries of the past. Then another excavation begins. Another buried structure is uncovered. Another set of ancient tools is carefully brushed free from the soil. Suddenly, historians must rewrite another chapter. It has happened before. It will almost certainly happen again. Somewhere beneath deserts that have never been surveyed, forests too dense to explore completely, or coastlines hidden beneath the sea, there may be discoveries waiting that will transform our understanding once more. Future archaeologists equipped with technologies we cannot yet imagine may answer questions that today remain unsolved. Or they may uncover entirely new mysteries that we have not even thought to ask. That is the true excitement of history. Not certainty. Discovery. The greatest adventure in archaeology is not proving extraordinary claims. It is following the evidence wherever it leads, even when it surprises us. So perhaps the better question is no longer, was there a civilization before ancient Egypt? Perhaps the better question is, how much of humanity's earliest story have we simply not found yet? Because history is not buried only in books. It is buried beneath mountains, beneath forests, beneath deserts, and beneath oceans that have covered ancient landscapes for thousands of years. Each excavation brings us one step closer to understanding where we came from. Each discovery reminds us that our ancestors were often more remarkable than we once believed. And each unanswered question invites the next generation of explorers to keep searching. If this documentary changed the way you think about humanity's distant past, we'd love to know your thoughts. Do you believe archaeology has only uncovered a small fraction of our earliest history, or do you think the biggest discoveries have already been made? Share your perspective in the comments. Some of the most fascinating conversations begin with a single question. If you enjoyed this journey through one of history's greatest mysteries, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Unknown Discoveries. Every week, we explore forgotten civilizations, hidden ancestry, remarkable archaeological discoveries, and the untold stories that continue to reshape our understanding of the past. Until next time, remember this. History is not a finished story. It is a puzzle. And somewhere, beneath the earth or beneath the sea, another missing piece may already be waiting to be found.